tonight you are here for the Good City panel, which is the second in our Chicago Architecture Biennale partner program. So we're doing a ton of architecture this fall. It's been a lot of fun. Our first project can still be seen on our roof until early January. It's a gigantic billboard of lights that was designed specifically for us by Boa Light Studio. The panel in the salon is some of their other work they do worldwide, including Le Monde headquarters in Paris and the France Pavilion at the new expo in Dubai. But first things first, my name is Aimée Laberge. I'm the director of program. I'm super happy to be here tonight. And again, apologies for the little delay. We wanted to record and make sure we could record this presentation.
Hooray!
We can. Merci, Jordan. Okay. I want to say that this program, it's always important to say thank you. I want to say that this program is possible in part thanks to the cultural services of the French Embassy in the United States under the City initiative. And the French Connection. Well, the French Connection for us is Odile Compagnon, one of the two persons who will be here tonight, because Odile has been with us from the start of our association with the Chicago Architecture Biennale. She was bringing her students from the School of the Art Institute to invest our building with their imagination and creativity. She was giving them briefing that included quotes from Victor Hugo, Edouard Glissant, and also there was spectacular things that happened here. We had all sorts of things in the alley, in the courtyard, in our cupboard. People were digging holes, patching holes, all sorts of things going on. But today, Odile is joined by Traci Wile, as they will tell us more about the Good City Group. Formed in March 2013, the Good City Group came together around the idea of how the good city can inform our roles as civic innovators, which we're going to be tonight. We're going to be civic innovators who care deeply about Chicago's future. The group was born out of a collective desire for cross-disciplinary experimental proposals that affect our everyday experiences. The Good City Group explores inventive, equitable approaches to placemaking, urban design, and environmental justice at the hyperlocal scale that can have a big impact on residents. A bit more about Odile and Traci. Odile is an architect with a practice in Chicago, Illinois, and Paris, France. She teaches architecture and scenography at the School of the Art Institute. She likes to always have something to say when someone asks her, "What's good?" Large question. Traci Wile is a community organizer, artist, and designer. She deeply believes in working for and with people to foster empowered, cohesive communities. We're going to have someone coming through the door in a minute, so I don't know if that's going to distract you from...
We can take it.
We can take it? Okay. You tell me when to turn the light up. I'll be sitting right here.
Should we turn the lights on? Yeah, a little bit. So, thank you very much, Aimée, for this introduction and for having invited us to speak about the Good City Group, which is very dear to us. And I also want to thank the French consulate, the cultural, and also the French Embassy, who is also sponsoring this event via their new program, which is the Villa Albertine. And also thank you to the Chicago Architecture Biennial. So, hello everyone. Merci d'être venu. And we're very grateful for your coming to the Alliance Française. After so long spent communicating online, it's really great to be in movement again.
It is. Aimée, you want to get the lights whenever you're ready?
The lights up?
Yes. So we're here to talk about the Good City Group, of which we have a couple of our members besides Odile and I. So we have Bennett here, and Suzanne, I see somewhere. There she is, back there. So we're going to talk about our work, about creating equitable spaces at the hyperlocal scale. But before we jump into that, we want to introduce ourselves. So allons-y. I'm Odile.
And I'm Traci. And we've known each other for a few years, but before we even met, we also lived around the corner from one another in Paris, and probably ran into each other at the Parc Monceau when I was with my daughter Sophie.
And I would go with Sarah and Julia, who I was taking care of when I was an au pair living in Paris.
But I met Traci really when she came to SAIC for grad school. She took a class that I taught would explore the role of designers in post-disaster scenarios. And this was in 2010, right after the earthquake in Chile.
So we did some design interventions at the Neighborhood Community Center in order to provide a space for residents to meet and organize. The center became an important space for activating for the community to demand changes from the city government.
And we were again together last year teaching a graduate studio at SAIC. And we stressed working simultaneously at a large urban scale together with the scale of furniture that our students could prototype and test in place.
And in this grad studio project, we helped teach the students how to do this on Zoom for the most part because we were in the middle of the pandemic.
We actually work the same way, the two of us, in North Lawndale, where I have met some community groups in need of design assistance while teaching at the SAIC Home and Square campus. We facilitate workshops and design charrettes together, and this was the Sears Sunken Garden, which is part of the historic Sears and Roebuck complex.
So not all of the North Lawndale sites that we've been working with are this monumental. But we help residents envision their ideas for their neighborhoods, such as activating vacant lots. So we facilitated a few online community charrettes to get some input about a visual system meant to unify a series of community gardens throughout North Lawndale. So during the charrette, folks decided on Adikra symbols, which you can see at the top there. These are symbols out of West Africa, and they were a way to provide specificity for each garden's mission, while also connecting them all together at the larger neighborhood scale.
And this year, our familiarity with the community and with some of the challenges that the neighborhood faces has allowed us to work with Soil Lab, one of the teams of architects from the Architecture Biennial. The site is close to a site whose owners I've been working with for several years, and I got interested in this biennial project, so I shared what I learned with Traci.
So the Soil Lab team is made up of a group of architects from Denmark and Ireland who have also been working with rammed earth walls and creating homemade bricks. So I came on board to help with this rammed earth workshops that took place over 3 weeks. We built all these rammed earth walls in 3 weeks with the Irish architects who were actually here in Chicago, James and Eileen. So we invited participants from the neighborhood to do this work. It was hot, it was hard, and it was dirty, but it was also amazing with an amazing group of people that came to join us.
Great. So after this introduction of what we both have been doing together, I want to go to the Good City group. Traci and I are two of the group of designers and planners who have gotten together out of our shared love for Chicago. We work with neighborhood organizations to seed imaginative ideas and create opportunities to take ownership of the public space.
As Aimee said, the group was started in 2013, and we really kind of came back to it in the last year in earnest, particularly thinking about reconnecting communities as we come out of the pandemic.
Some of the tools used by the Good City group are walks and bike tours, which allow people to meet one another and talk about the things that are working and those that are not working in their neighborhoods. Sometimes the elder person comes along, which creates an opportunity for group photo and also for them to hear firsthand what their constituents have to say. This year, with the biennial, we connect neighbors, but we also connect neighborhoods that are often cut off from each other by hard-to-cross infrastructure like trains or expressways. We've already walked through 4 of the neighborhoods where some of our members live. That's Jefferson Park, Forest Glen, West Ridge, South Shore, and next week Bennett will take us to Portage Park, and I hope you'll join us.
Walking allows us to take the time to see the unseen. Biking is great, of course, but when we walk, we notice things we don't usually notice. And we get to understand a little bit better what contributes to the health and vibrancies of our communities.
Another tool that we like to use are called props, which we bother from the theater. They're objects, pieces of furniture, sign, that are interactive. Their form suggests various placements or positions to enhance a perspective or make a space more comfortable. Here, the Good City Bench was designed to mark the starting points of our walks, and it has 2 positions that you can choose depending on your mood or your ability.
More recently, we've been developing a type of prop to use along Devon Avenue. In public spaces that CDOT has done some improvements, but don't get used so very often. These proposed props could have multiple uses, such as getting together over food, or art making, or playing games.
I've lost my page. Sorry, this is my first time doing this, so it's very stressful. The walks and props, together with the maps that we like people to use, are what we use for participatory placemaking, a design collaboration which provides opportunities for people to take ownership of the spaces that aren't necessarily labeled as public spaces.
So we've been in conversation with one of our partner groups, the Space Shift Collective, who are here on the right-hand side, to think about props and interventions that would activate a street corner at Devon and Tallman in Westridge.
And 2 weeks ago, on that very small intersection, they managed to rotate 3 bands with 3 completely different stage settings. Hundreds of people stopped by, and it gave us a chance to observe and get impressions, so that when we go back to the drawing board for the props or the bigger plans, we can make better informed decisions.
And while we're still developing concepts for these props, we are excited to continue collaborating on these ideas so we can further complement Space Shift's cultural productions such as dance, music, poetry, and art making.
And obviously we know that things take time. In Jefferson Park over there, a few years ago, our participatory strategies highlighted the use of this back alley as a pedestrian shortcut. We celebrated it, and now, after 6 years, it's actually becoming a permanent pedestrian plaza. After the first event, the neighbors raised funds for a second one, where the history of the neighborhood was celebrated. And we passed through this alley during one of our walks, and people recognized familiar places and stories. Now there's a coffee shop in this vacant store that will use the plaza for outdoor dining, and it gives the neighbors access to one other amenity along their last mile route.
So we want to spend a minute talking about the last mile. Typically, the last mile refers to the final leg of a delivery system to get services or goods to an end user. In design, we want to start looking at the essential places we need to go within a mile, particularly a mile walking. So according to the urbanist Dan Lusher of San Francisco, the easiest way to travel within an urban neighborhood is to walk or bike. No waiting for the bus or train, no waiting for a Lyft or an Uber, no parking issues, which we know very well. So we should all be able to access most of the places we need to go within that 15-minute walk or bike ride. So that's the last mile. And this is from his blog, the15minutecity.com. So each neighborhood should fulfill 6 social functions. And this is from a BBC article on the way we socialize. And those 6 social functions include living, working, supplying, caring, learning, and enjoying. So now we want to ask you, what are some of the important resources and amenities that we need to make this work in terms of that walking distance from where we live? So what are some sort of things that we need in this last mile in our neighborhoods? Yeah.
Public restrooms.
Public restrooms. Oh, that's a good one. I didn't have that on my list.
That's great.
Yeah.
Grocery stores.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else?
Parks.
Parks, for sure. Green spaces, yeah.
Play space.
Play spaces.
Yep. Any kind of recreational space. Some of that might happen in parks, but it could also be elsewhere, which also ties to fitness maybe and some wellness concepts also. Anybody else have thoughts?
Urgent care.
Yeah.
Schools.
Yeah.
Cafes.
Yeah.
Lots of
Somebody likes food. I'm with you. I mean, I'm right there. Cafes, bars, wine, sure.
entertainment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that come in what form?
Performance.
Performance? Art?
Cultural center, like
Yeah.
the Alliance.
Exactly. Yes. Cultural venues and institutions. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Library.
Yep. Yep. As a community space, right? Libraries have changed quite a bit in the last couple decades, and now there's so much more about bringing people together rather than just coming to get a book. So much about sharing knowledge as well as gathering.
What else did you have on your list?
What else did I have on my list? I think we actually, work or alternative workspaces.
Yeah, you don't need those.
I mean, at this point, maybe we don't, right? Because we're all still crammed in our homes, some of us. Okay. So I think maybe, okay.
So, we, after this presentation of what we do, we want you to actually try one of our participatory game to figure out something also together. And so you should all have received 3 flags when you entered the auditorium. And what we would like you to do is raise the flag that corresponds to the transportation mode that you took to come here to Alliance Française. So white if it was by car, orange if you walked or biked, and blue if you took public transportation.
Look, that's a nice mix.
Nice mix, yeah, that's cool. And looks nice too. So, we didn't choose the blue, white, and red on purpose,
but she did, really.
Okay. There's some in the closet here or something?
And now we're wondering if you would mind looking around. You still have to raise your flag a little longer and look around to see if there is someone near you that's taken the same mode of transportation to come here. And we would like you to have a little conversation with that person
No, I would also ask that if you came with someone that you know, maybe you find someone you don't know. I would see you guys here in the middle.
And so to kind of give a prompt to your conversation, we're both teachers, so we're also trying to give prompts to
always a learning moment
to our audience. And we just talked about some of the things that are essential to the last mile. Did you pass any of those on your way here? What are some of the essentials that are missing from the neighborhood? And also we realize that some of you may know this area better than others, but one thing that's very important to us also as we do these participatory exercises is to recognize that everyone is an expert in one thing or another. So maybe you don't know this neighborhood, but maybe you know how to park when you come here, or you have some things that you can share in the conversation. Okay, so we'll give
We'll give a couple
few
minutes. Yeah. Let's set the timer.
You're going to set the timer?
Bah, il faut voir que en dessin, je vais considérer et aussi une catégorie de
about our good city. So would anyone like to share some of the things that you guys discussed? Was there anything particularly good?
Just stand up and
we
speak
just
out.
thought of it after you asked what do you need in the community, and I said post office, and I realized we do not have a post office very close to us, and at our work, the one nearest us closed. So that's something I thought it just was surprising. I didn't think about it at first. It just came to me.
Yeah,
So we
great.
discussed it for a while. So maybe that's something that's changing. now.
Well, I think that goes to one of the 6 buckets, right, around supply and how we get things to us. And so there's, post office, there's Amazon boxes, there's staples that kind of serve as that. Kohl's also serves as that. I mean, there's just like so many different.
To return things.
Oh yeah, did it just return? I don't really use that so much, but
And
yeah, it's
Amazon
good.
lockers in the Park District.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that, but there's Amazon lockers in the Park District. I didn't know that either.
We have them in my building in the high rise. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I can get my stuff 24 hours
So,
a day. Just
yeah,
a little half.
Right.
Stuff 24 hours a day.
When I come home late from these audience process events.
That might be another conversation we have to have about what that means for us. Does anyone else want to share?
Anything? This one was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Well, we were talking about the difference in the cities, the difference between Texas, because Texas, you need a car to get very far, because the distance is so far. And it translates back into the towns where everybody has a car, and as a result, it's very easy to move around, but you need that car, so it's a different, I don't know what you say, format than say Chicago or New York or older cities.
Yeah. Did you guys hear what Bob was saying?
But for the recording, you slowly repeat it.
Okay, so Bob was saying, I know Bob because he's my husband. And he would really love to go live in Texas, I think. He likes to drive. And so he's saying that it's true, we have different perspective on scale and what's walkable or what's not walkable depending on where city we live in. And Bob says in cities in Texas, you can't really do anything without a car, and so it changes your perception of distance, right? And not like in Chicago or New York or Paris, where you can walk everywhere.
Does that mean that one's good or bad or
No.
whatever? It's a different format,
Right.
different need.
So there isn't one that's better or the other, but the needs are different, and therefore the means of transportation are different too.
Also, Houston being the most polluted city in the country now. So just saying. Also, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right. So that maybe there is something related to that in how that affects our environments, because with so many cars now, it's like super polluted and
It may
it's.
not be necessarily the car, it could be the microclimate of the city, the nature of weather, just like Paris. Paris in the summer is super polluted, but that's only because of the way the climate holds that pollution in the city in the summertime. The rest of the seasons, it gets dispersed. So we can't assume that it's the result of having a lot of cars in Houston. We have a lot of cars in other places, and the traffic.
Bob, we'll continue this discussion later. I'm not against car. I mean, I drive a lot. I'm not saying that that's good.
Yes, there was also someone in the back, I think.
We talked about parks and how
Parks.
important they can be in the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you live near a park?
Yeah,
Do you use it?
not as much as that.
Yeah. Hi.
We talked a little bit about major arteries, and in Boston where it was submerged, and in Rochester where it's below grade but exposed, and they're filling it in. And the conversations about how to use the space that you've reclaimed. And in Rochester in particular, it was put in the early 60s, I believe, and it divided a major, long-standing community from the downtown. And so the people who are still there would like to see that restored with single-family houses, as opposed to another part that was reclaimed, where they built basically identical apartment buildings in a row. They look kind of nice, they're for upper income, but it still is sort of a wall against going downtown.
And were you talking about Boston and the project they did to take down the highway to connect, reconnect the? Of course, I was there during that. It was amazing, actually. But what they did was, and what you're saying is reclaim some of that, and now people walk to the wharfs and hang out and have lunch out in some of these public spaces that they got back when they tore down big sections of the highway. Yeah.
We're talking about Houston. Houston has a similar plan. Houston has a loop around downtown. This just happened to be activity. Houston has a big expressway that wraps around downtown and cuts all the communities off from downtown. And it's terrible to walk or even take public transportation to get to the center of the city because it's so ugly. And Houston is now rebuilding the loop, so it's only loops on one side of it, and to the south, they're going to destroy all of the expressway. So it's going to be a walkable connection to the city, opening the dikes to walkability to the downtown area. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Any other? Yeah, Suzanne?
We didn't talk about this in our group, but I was just thinking about sidewalks themselves and how I generally trust that the condition of the sidewalk I'm walking on is pretty good. I don't have to look down all the time. But I was just on our South Shore walk a couple weeks ago, and he and I, Odile, walked down the street, and all of a sudden an entire piece of sidewalk was non-existent, and someone had put a temporary little stone or something in the middle, and you're supposed to hop on it to hop to the other side. And it's all water, it's filled with water because there's been so much rain it didn't drain. And that's the solution in some of the communities in our own city. And you have to walk very carefully or else you're going to wipe out. So, yeah.
So for those of you, I don't know if you all heard, but what Suzanne was talking about was sidewalks that we take for granted. Like in most neighborhoods, you can just trust that the sidewalks are not going to necessarily make you trip, but in some other areas of the city, they're not as well maintained, and there could be some pretty big barriers to walkability and to accessibility by people of all means of walkability. When people talk about walkability, it doesn't necessarily mean walking with your feet, but it's usually understood that it's using the sidewalks with whatever ability you may have, whether it's with a cane or a stroller or a wheelchair. That's what walkability encompasses. Yeah, so that's great. Any other? Yeah, you. Yeah.
We talked about bikes, especially bike lanes, because well, I think Chicago, generally speaking, is quite bike friendly. But we're comparing it to other countries like China or the Netherlands, where the bike lanes are clearly separated from the main road, and how a lot of people can be reluctant using those bike lanes here because they don't feel safe. Especially when sometimes people in Chicago, they drive completely forgetting about bikes, and they never check their blind spot, and they just turn, and eventually they cut completely, or what can be dangerous. So yeah, that's mainly what we talked about.
Did you talk with Bennett?
No.
Oh, okay. You should meet Bennett.
Right. Yeah, so here the talk was about bike lanes and how there's still like maybe a learning curve to understanding how to live with them, that they are absolutely necessary, but we don't yet know exactly how to live with them and how to share the streets between pedestrians and between all of these.
But cities who have been making a lot of progress sharing, adding more and more bicycles, you hear there's a lot of problems. Like Paris, people are complaining that there's too many bicycles, and New York has a lot of bicycle too. It's a typical city chat. So what's the solution? I mean, we want more bike, but the cities are, North American cities, and even the space are not really like.
The Netherlands.
So
You have to benchmark on the Netherlands.
And these are all questions that we speak about with people that we work with as the Good City Group, and Bennett probably has a lot to say about it. I'm surprised he hasn't really said anything yet.
Well, I mean, one could say that in cities like Chicago, railroad sort of constructed cities, that there are actually alternatives, and one of the central challenges is the way that North American cities apply bike infrastructure doesn't always take advantage of the structure of the city. So, like the boulevard system in Chicago could be designed in a way that was way more bike friendly. There's a lot of space there, but there is a very keen idea that somehow arterial streets should also be the place for rented bike lanes, which works in the Netherlands when fewer people are driving.
Yeah, exactly.
But in
More
the
bikes
States,
than anything.
we don't really control how many people drive, and in fact, arterial streets are designed for motor vehicles to be privileged to turn right and left and to have a certain number going through, which always means the cyclist and the pedestrian are secondary in the consideration of how American streets are built, and that's our central challenge. Local streets, you have more freedom, right?
Right, and you also have the rail to trails. A lot of cities all over the world have infrastructure, train infrastructure that's not being used, that can be converted into walkable and bikeable. I don't want to say bikeable spaces. Yeah. So maybe we'll hear from one more person. Yeah.
Oh, so we didn't talk about it, but I was just thinking also, I really enjoy when there's like a car-free zone in neighborhoods and like promenades and stuff like that. So we need more of those, I think, for neighborhoods to be better. Because I'm always scared in my wheelchair of getting hit by cars, or there is no sidewalk, or lots of problems. So it'd be nice if the street was just open and people could just go around.
That was, sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say that was kind of an interesting byproduct of the pandemic, right? Because we saw a little bit more of that, and it was actually quite amazing.
Yeah.
And so how could we rethink, what our sort of circulations are and who has priority? And maybe it's not cars.
Right now it's restaurants.
Well, that's true. But then restaurant means food, and that means like lots of good food and wine, right? So I'm down with that.
No, not yet. So maybe now we have another question for you. Is in this city, who would you go to and congratulate them for the great stuff, or ask for some improvements? Do you know, like, who would you go to ask for? The question that you had about, who would you go to in the city to get these problems that you see resolved? The alderman?
Not really.
Yeah, right. CDOT, Chicago Department of Transportation.
CDOT, yeah. You know someone there?
311, supposed to call in smaller things to 311.
Oh, 311, yeah. So this is difficult. It's difficult to know who to go to. And so as the Good City Group, what we've been doing with the groups that we've worked with, whether for the alley or for the work that we do now on Devon, we try to kind of make these connections between the neighbors and the governing agencies, and also sometimes between the agencies themselves, which sometimes have a difficulty speaking to each other. So,
Question.
yes.
So do you have any more success as a group as opposed to an individual trying to get something corrected?
Yes, as a group, because we are all designers and planners, and so we have a little bit of expertise, and in our professions, we tend to work with these agencies, so we can then kind of relay the information from the neighborhood organizations back to those groups. And we do this also always through interaction through these walks, through these events that we organize, like in the alley, to kind of stress an issue and see how together it could be resolved. And as we said, it takes time, but it's also rewarding for the people who live in the neighborhood to see that something they've talked about is actually listened to. Yes.
You should really try and mobilize the aldermen for whatever local project they need accomplished. Because they will activate the agencies if you can get to them and I don't know,
that's right.
Provide them with some promise of votes if
Yes. Un peu de vin. So, do you want to go to the final slide?
Okay. Yeah.
So, as every time we do these charrettes or workshops, we come with a plan, but then the plan is never really followed, and we have to adapt. And so this is what happened here, where we actually thought we would be focusing more on this particular neighborhood, but then you went out and spoke about things that are global or happening in Chicago and other cities, which is great. And that's also how our workshops happen, is by making these connections between what the people really have to say and kind of put our plans aside for a minute to really listen and take notes. What we also try and do is to find ways, and this I kind of learned from Suzanne, who's there also, is to make sure that the people who don't necessarily want to speak in a group like this have other opportunities to express themselves and say what they see, how they want to do things. So we have tools also to engage them, and one of them is something that we invite you to continue using to prolong the conversation. So in when we go for a glass of wine and cheese in the salon, you are going to find 2 copies of this map. It's a carte muette, like the maps that we used to have in elementary school for geography tests, where you had to put the mountains and the cities, the countries, the rivers and all their tributaries. So this is a carte muette of the neighborhood around Alliance Française. And we would like you, if you want, to take the pens and the markers that are on those 2 maps and write down the things that you know about this neighborhood that are actually doing what you were saying earlier or are failing to do that. And then when you're done, we will leave these maps with Aimée as a thank you gift. So she can go to CDOT, to the Alderman, to CPS, the Park District, DK, CAT, French Council, to make your neighborhood encore meilleur.